great. My name is Tim Milburn. I'm the Director of Mission Advancement here at Northwest Christian Credit Union. Been here about a year and a half, kind of oversee marketing special projects. I'd like to introduce the rest of our team for the workshop today, beginning with David. David, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? And then Mike, you, and then Brad.
Okay.
Dave Mowry, I'm District Superintendent on the Northwest District. That's it.
Okay. Mike Zagarella, Northwest Christian Credit Union. I am the head of church lending.
And I'm Brad Swartzentruber. I'm President and CEO of Northwest Christian Credit Union.
That's awesome.
Or thanks. As they frequently like to call me, CE0.
Sometimes, yes. Behind closed doors, so which is why our doors are closed right now. So for this session, we're going to talk about this process of thinking, desiring to move into some type of growth building project for a church or ministry, and that is going to require additional funds. And when we begin to think about lending or how to finance something like this size of a project, many of us haven't been trained in that. We're not sure what the steps are. We're not even sure all of the parameters. And so our hope is in this workshop that we're gonna hit some of those pain points that we see time and time again to help smooth the process. And also, I love the way we're gonna end this thing, because we shouldn't be afraid of those difficulties we encounter. Those can actually be really good things. And so I wanna start off with our panel here and just start with this question. When we begin to think about lending and securing funds for a building project, is this a difficult process?
I will answer that because I deal with pastors all the time. And the initial part is not. The rest of it is going to take a lot of time and commitment. And so those are the types of things that a pastor needs to be prepared to look to do, and really look for help within their own church to walk them through some of that from their end.
And so, Mike, when you say at the beginning it's not that difficult, what part of that are you saying isn't really all that hard?
Okay, so like I'm going to go from how we handle it. Whenever a church is interested in either refinance or purchase or construction or whatever type of thing they want to do with their church facility, we just ask basically for a single page application, and then we need 3 years of their financials, and then that's pretty much it to get the process started.
Awesome. Okay. Anybody else? Is this a difficult process?
As somebody who has gone through, the answer is yes.
Which is why we have David here.
Yeah. And in many ways, how could it not be? So I think a lot for myself going into a $1 million project. I was just like, what's the fastest time I can get to the end? And I think that's sort of our American roots, but it's probably international as well. But the goal was always the building, the goal was completion, the goal was the dream on the other side. And what I quickly discovered was that God wanted to work just like he does in our personal life, but he wanted to work in the process as a way of discipleship for myself, for me, but also for the church. And there's a quote from my grandfather, E.B. Hartley, who is a Nazarene pastor for years. And he said that he loved pastoring a church through a building program. And I think it was because of this notion of development and the notion of there's a very tangible goal, but in the midst of a tangible goal, there's a lot of intangible things that happen in the life of a church. You get to talk about money, and I think that's something I'm taking away from Jaron Rao. Is the opportunity to talk about money is a good one. We should make full advantage of that, as he was saying. But there's also many other things, utilizing groups and development of skills of all the people. So yes, it's difficult, and I think that difficulty is actually to be embraced. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I love that because you're going to share a little bit in a moment about your story when you were going through that $1 million project in Twin Falls. And this process is different. Most of us have we've walked through an auto loan, or we pay a mortgage, those types of loans. But how is this construction loan different than other types of loans that we may want to acquire?
Are you asking me, Tim?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
The team. This is always to the group, Mike. So feel free to feel like I'm talking directly to you.
I got it. Okay. Construction loan is going to be much more complex than any of the other ones, and a lot of the reasons is there's more moving parts than that. This is not a one-time loan with a refinance. It's not even a purchase. It is a process, a lot of times lasting 12 months. And so during that process, there is people to pay, contractors, there's inspections that need to be done every so often. Sometimes there's, pictures that need to be taken and brought back so people can take a look at what the progress has been. So there's a number of things that need to happen in a construction loan, but it is systematic. So, but just to get the expectation, there is going to be more work because it lasts so much longer.
And does it always go as quickly as you think it's going to go?
No. Good question. It really depends. Sometimes it's on weather. Sometimes it's on subcontractors and materials. We've had churches who have changed what they were going to do. And so it gets pushed out farther than that 12 months. And so, it might take 18. But for the most part, 12 to 18 months is pretty much what you can look at. 18 is about the far end, but a lot of them are done in a year or less.
I think the other thing that's really, really important to keep in mind is, again, the timing of things, and especially right now, what we're experiencing is such a marked increase in the cost of materials that you've really got to plan that things can change throughout that process. And you've got bids, and if the time frame goes a little bit too long, sometimes they have the right to redo that bid. And sometimes, I had golf on Saturday with one of our local contractors, and in the local area here in Nampa, just the cost of wood has gone up 18% in the single month of January. It's just crazy what's happening. And so you got to keep those type of things in mind for the cost of materials.
Which is why I'm going to build my house out of straw. So, like the first little pig. So, David, tell us a little bit about your story. I mean, the process that you went through and some of the things that you noticed along the way. And I mean, full disclosure, you worked with Northwest Christian in the process and those types of things. But really, we want to know, coming at it as a pastor, leader of congregation, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I learned early on to be collaborative. I really enjoy making facilities better. And so that was a big driving force for me. But there was a lot of time that I spent trying to identify who are the people that I trust that need to be around the table in making decisions. So I had a trusted board member who I knew had the trust of the congregation, and he was really side by side with me the entire time, making very strategic decisions about the direction of this. We also hired an architect to help us with a comprehensive plan that touched every part of the facility, really. It just brought the whole thing up. And then we did end up using a contractor who was outside the church. And so we really hired out experts in these fields. It was really difficult as a pastor because I knew we had talented people in the church that maybe could have done some of that, and the church had history of that. But ultimately, it helped everything to have professionals walking through that, and I would say even money well spent. Also working with the an architect and a contractor did help us with the loan process with the credit union, because when there were benchmarks that needed to be hit, like Mike was saying, it was easy to go to them and say, this is where we're at. And they knew, because they've worked with people before on this. So that made the process a lot easier. But I would say if there's something I learned, I probably would have gone a little bit deeper in collaboration. The areas that I was frustrated in are probably areas I didn't collaborate enough or get the right people around the table, where I took it on myself to make quick decisions to try to speed things along. And then that ended up biting me. And so I think finding the right people, even for the different parts of the project, was really important. For example, we striped a gym. And instead of me saying, or me and the architect who don't use the gym, we brought in the people who did a sports program and said, how would you dream about doing the stripes? We let them do it. And boy, there's just a lot of ownership as we spread that around a little bit. So I think leaning into collaboration intentionally is something I wish I would have even done a little bit more, and maybe even created some kind of a flow chart so that maybe my board would have known better where opportunities were for collaboration. It was a long process, but yeah, again, it's interesting how I discovered some leadership potential in people I didn't identify before the project that I saw in the project. And then the benefit of that was how many people were developed on the other side. And our relationship was stronger. And we were just almost a different church, not because the building was different, but because we were different. So,
Dave, if I could, let me ask you a question. I know one of the things that's frequently a concern for a church going into a building project is a loss of focus on ministry. What was some of the things that you did going into that project to make sure that the ministry continued and that everyone didn't get distracted from the ministry because of the building?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What's interesting is that church had a history that predated me of being intentional in their facility, and they actually identified almost as a core value that it's healthy when we are inconvenienced. So as we were going through this, we had some board members who were remembering when they went through tough times and sacrificed for the sake of a renovation or a building. And we tried to capture that. So we were inconvenienced. There is one story that was powerful for me. As we started this renovation, it was very disruptive, but we actually had a group of African refugees that started to come to our church a few months into this massive renovation. And there came a moment where we were going to save a few $1,000s by moving all of the pews in the sanctuary ourselves. And we decided to do that on a Sunday afternoon after church. So everybody was there. We had a potluck. And what happened was we had African refugees side by side with white Americans, all working together, hands in hands. We never could have put that together if it had been, there's just no way we could have manipulated that moment. But God did. I mean, God just orchestrated this moment where we got to be side by side. So yeah, some of that you can plan for, shifting and all of that, but also I think God isn't wasting this moment in the life of the church either. And I don't know if I've completely answered your question, Brad, but I do think embracing the inconvenience actually helps develop character in the church, because we're coddled, so much, like heaven forbid we have to be uncomfortable, and we kind of say, well, our older people will never be inconvenienced, when in reality, for a cause or for a mission, they will, so.
Something else you mentioned there, when you talk about the church coming together and voluntarily saving a couple $1,000s by taking the pews out. It also made me think about the issue of accountability, in terms of when you talked about your using an outside contractor who wasn't a member of the church, but yet you use some gifts in kind, so to speak, gifts for construction processes or the maybe tear down. But did you ever have an issue where you were glad that you had the outside contractor because of accountability, stuff that you didn't have to step on a member's toe?
Yeah, did I tell you that story?
I don't think you have, but I'm glad I asked.
You heard it here first.
we had this gorgeous. The architect had really nice wood wall slats. That's really popular right now, and so he had ordered these beautiful wood walls that are just nice slat walls, and it's this really high quality wood. When it came in, it was knotted pine, so it looked like a cabin, looked like a log cabin. And we were kind of looking at it like, well, that's not really what we had in mind, but it is kind of an outdoorsy look. And the architect came in and said, "No way, this is not what you ordered. It's not what you paid for." And the contractor was like, "Well, we can give you a discount if you just keep it." He didn't want to have to redo it. And the architect, looked at me and just said, "You should do it right." And I said, "We want it done right." And they said, okay. So the fact that they didn't work for the church was a big deal. Now, having said that, we worked with our contractor because we did have subcontractors who attended our church. And what we told them was, if you want to bid on working on our church, run that bid low through the contractor, and we'll tell them you're bidding on it low and why you're bidding on it low. So there was a way of working that discount through the contractor that did end up saving the church a significant portion of money. But again, that was a predetermined relationship with the contractor. We said, for us, it was a painter. This guy was going to paint everything at a way lower rate. And the contractor said, "That's great. I'd love to pass that savings on to you." So.
But, yeah. and even in that situation, that individual was accountable to the contractor.
Yes.
Directly to you.
Yes, that's right.
Well, that's good. Well, there's a number of pain points that we've talked about that people face along the way. And the first one right off the bat, and I didn't even realize, I learned this yesterday, that this truly can be for some congregations, this can be a pain point in the process. But Mike, you were saying that, as part of that initial application, we require, working with us, that you give 3 years of past financials. So why is that maybe a pain point that you've encountered with other groups that have, made that initial application, and then all of a sudden this is difficult for them?
Yeah, one of the things they run into is not having a bookkeeper or somebody on, in their church or on their board that has any kind of accounting background. And so for us to be able to look at, an income statement and balance sheet, we do need to have certain things in order. And there have been some churches that really have had to gone out and have a bookkeeper go over it, clean it up, and then it was something that a financial institution could actually look at and use. So
that's really important. Something as simple as just good bookkeeping prior to this. Yeah.
If you're going to work with any financial institution, if you're going to get any kind of loan, especially based on real estate, you are going to have clean financial statements. And it is really valuable. And it goes back to the church now, that they would have better records of what they're doing, and even looking at where their expenses are going easier. just by having a bookkeeper, like I said, somebody in the church, maybe the treasurer, who has a background there.
Yeah, because sometimes that's difficult because a church has a treasurer that may turn over every 2 or 3 years, and so trying to keep those things in line and in good condition, yeah, that could be difficult.
Yeah, I'm
Nope,
smiling because that's happened.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and
Several
we recognize
times.
that. Yeah, and so to get this loan, I mean, there's a variety of ways you can do it, and there's a number of terms that people may not be familiar with. Like when you say balloon, to me, I'm thinking birthday party, and I'm handing it to somebody. But when you say balloon, I mean, there's a number of terms there that we need to familiarize ourselves with, right? If we don't understand, that can get us in trouble a little bit later down the road.
Yeah, people are familiar with the home mortgage in some respect, interest rates and that type of thing. A church is actually considered a commercial loan, and a commercial loan requires, a lot more background, a lot more documentation, and then just the structure of it is different. So let me give an example of ours. So you mentioned balloon, but I'm going to start with the rate, then go to balloon, then go to what's called amortization. So basically, you have a rate based on either a 3 or a 5 year adjustment. So that's pretty much, standard within commercial loans. There's things outside of that, but those are the most popular. And then you have a time period called a balloon, which means this loan is going to mature before everything is paid up. So, and that's what's called amortization. So amortization is the point to where you make your payment. Like on a 30-year mortgage, in 30 years, you'll be done. Okay. With our loans, it's different. You may have a loan out to say 25 years, and that's what your payment's based on. But at the end of 15 years, it's going to come due or balloon or mature. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, sort of. I mean, you get in the weeds, but these are things you have to be aware of. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, those are the 3 main things to look at. Like I said, amortization is what your payment is based on. So just like a 30-year mortgage, the balloon is where it matures sooner than that 30 years or 25 years. And then the adjustment, like an adjustable rate mortgage, would happen every 3 to 5 years. So those are the 3 main things that you will see in commercial loans, no matter who you talk to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay. Another pain point for us is we see that churches are set up with a certain governing structure, right? They have their articles of incorporation or the rules by which they govern themselves, and that may include just their local congregation, as well as maybe a district entity or a denominational entity involved as well. And what we have found is sometimes decisions aren't made properly in line with the church's governing structure or the bylaws that they have. Would you guys speak to that?
Sure. It is true a lot of times that the bylaws were written a while ago, and if they haven't been updated recently, maybe the pastor that's only been there 5 years or less may not have read them. And so when a loan comes to us, we read, word for word what those bylaws say and what is the legal order of which you're going to do the actual loan, who is authorized to sign, do you need a church vote, do you need district approval, all those types of things will be in the bylaws. And it is really helpful if a pastor could just go through those, not necessarily before, but at some time go through those so that they know how the order of structure that the church is set up for.
Yeah, it's important to note that if you don't follow either the articles of incorporation, what they require, or what the bylaws require, or in the case of the Church of Nazarene, what the manual requires, you can actually create a situation in which your board members have financial liability for this improperly acquired loan. And so I think it's really important that folks understand that again, because this is a commercial loan, there's different levels of responsibility and hoops to jump through that you really got to make sure you do everything to the letter of the law or letter of the bylaws.
Yeah, one of the nice things is that when we do the underwriting process, we go through all those things. So if something hasn't been properly done, the right people haven't signed, all those types of things, we will go back to the church and basically tell them, hey, you need a church vote, or this person isn't authorized to sign, you need somebody else to. So, but it's easier for the church if you know that ahead of time.
Yeah, you don't want to get to a week from closing and discover that you've got a 3-week process to get a church. You have to announce a church vote for 3 consecutive Sundays, and and then all of a sudden you're delaying and you're pushing out. So it's good to get that up front.
That's never happened before, has it?
I won't testify.
So, talk to me about if you're going to do a renovation or even an add-on or something else. Talk to me about how important it is to have a clean title and issues that we have seen with the title that they currently have with the church.
Yeah, we on every real estate backed loan, we will take a look at the title report, and there will be a number of things on there talking about whatever debt is on there, easements, if there's been, if there's any issues we need to take care of. Which reminds me of something that Brad brought up previously, was a time where a church, when we finally looked at the church's boundaries, there was one side completely missing in what they call the legal description, which says how, what are the boundaries of this property. And so they had to go back and get a surveyor to go in and redo it. And without that, they couldn't get a loan. The interesting thing is that issue had actually been a problem since 1969. And so there was other people that lent to them with that issue. So it was nice to be able to have them be able to clear that up, because if they ever wanted to sell that property, they would have had to have done that anyway.
And along those lines, I think it's important that probably not going to happen. Well, I guess it could happen in the construction with a new piece of bare ground. But when you're purchasing a building or something along those lines, it's important that when you do your title work, that you're noticing if there's any deed restrictions. We've had it before where the property had been donated to a particular congregation who, let's say they were Presbyterian, and in the deed it says if this property is ever not in a Presbyterian church, it reverts back to the people who donated it. So there's those type of things that can be, a part of a title that you really need to make sure you're doing your homework on before you go too far down particular roads.
I'll jump in here. One of the ways that helped us as a church was to collaborate with our district. So in Twin Falls, we were working with district leadership, but now here on the Northwest District, we have a retired engineer who's on our advisory board who comes alongside churches as a consultant. That's totally free. We also have a district legal counsel, an attorney, and he comes alongside churches that are navigating some of these legal things. And again, that's free of charge to the district within certain boundaries, but reading over documents, contracts, legal things, the district is a huge advantage to any local church just because of the broad range of resources available.
I love that, David. And just piggybacking on that, because you mentioned this earlier, one of the things that you really came away from the process of building with Twin Falls was the idea of collaboration. So as for all of you, as you're thinking about these projects, who should you have on your team? I mean, what skill sets or people would be beneficial to gather around you?
Yeah, one of those teams for me, because we did a lot with carpet and paint. So, and everybody might not agree with me on this, but I had a secret decor team, and I did not let it be known, even to the board, who was on that team. They knew I was on it, and I said, if there's a problem, you can come to me if anybody has an issue. But I did that so as a protection, because I just heard of so many people who got involved in that, and their ear got chewed up so bad that they left the church, and I did
Are you
not want
saying
that to happen.
decor? I'm sorry to interrupt, David. Are you saying decor can be a pain point?
Yeah, carpet color, paint color, you
Yeah,
name it.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah.
Right.
So still nobody knows who picked what. So
You were
And
wise.
since you're now a district superintendent, they can't complain to you anymore.
Who else do you guys think? Who should you have in your team?
I would say if you've got someone involved in banking in your church, get them on the team. I mean, again, construction people, carpet people, electricians, any of those type of people, harvest that experience.
Yeah, and accountants, that's another good one.
Yep.
I had somebody who was in business who had helped his company build massive storehouses for he was in the grain industry, commodities industry in the Magic Valley. But when I talked to him, he had built millions of dollars of construction, so he knew every builder, he knew a lot of the subs, he just knew that part of the industry, and he really helped navigate a lot of that locally for us. So
Yeah,
commercial construction.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, there's a lot of little details and nuance to this process. We didn't want to get into the deep weeds here, but in our conversation yesterday, we came away, and David really helped us with this, and maybe you can speak and start the conversation again around this, but that there are bumps in building a building that you are going to encounter, but that it is so true that you can use those bumps to also build your congregation. And I just thought that is so wise and present to what is going on in the life of the church. Whether or not you're in a building program, you can use the bumps to build your congregation. That was really good. Can you speak to that again, David?
Yeah, to me, it felt very formative because everybody was involved. We tried to include, all age groups at different points in the process. And so it became a part of the identity, was the building, but then it also the broader movement of what God was doing, to attach a building project to the mission of the church. And this is difficult these days because buildings aren't even being used as much during COVID. So I think it's never been harder to pitch something, a building program. But I do think it's tangible. I still see communities where the building is a place where it's a hub of activity. So yeah, for us it was just very formative. I had a pastor. I don't think this is going to be new, maybe to most, but I had a pastor who talked about the life cycle of a church. That arc, and what his thought was, you can change the life cycle of a church by a name change. If you change the name of the church, and everybody agrees, that's the other thing. But you can also, by doing a significant building program, and that can change the trajectory of a church. Not just, and I don't think it's because you've done those two things, but I think it's because you've done the internal work in the body to develop some consensus around mission. And I think that's what we miss when we just try to rush through, because on the other side, life's going to be perfect, on the other side, we're going to be able to do ministry. And I think we're missing it when we miss those uncomfortable moments. So you're almost creating a crisis so that you can grow from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Obviously,
yeah.
God creates it. He creates the
Sure.
moments.
Yeah.
But we are co-creators with
Absolutely.
Christ, and I think that's very valid. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Brad, Mike, anything you would add to this as we kind of near the end here?
The only thought that I kind of was thinking about that we hadn't really talked, well, we kind of touched on a little bit, was back in the bookkeeping and accounting area, was there's a real value in a church, at least periodically, going through and developing that 3-year look back window. Mike can tell you about a situation that we came across where when Mike was doing his underwriting evaluation on this church, the board was completely unaware that they had burned through about $200,000 in savings. And only by doing a 3-year look back and analysis did that really come to light. So that's, I think, even if you're not going into a building project or you're not going to be doing a refinance, I think it's a good thing to do periodically, just so that you can get a really good picture of the direction things are going.
Awesome. Well, that is good. Well, I want to end this time. We have about 10 minutes left. If there were any questions or anything that anybody wanted to raise with this group here.
What's the recommended cash to or income to debt ratio in these kinds of things? What's healthy?
You talking about the like on a down payment, or are you talking about the church's financials? Well,
I'm talking about the amount of debt that a church can take on.
Okay.
Based on, yeah.
Yeah. We have a general rule not rule, but just a general guideline that it's 3 times whatever the total amount of money you bring in from tithes and offerings. So 3 times that is just the general, and that's the top end.
Good. So I don't know this is actually in your area, but you may have informed opinions about it. What about capital campaigns? Are there groups you would say, hey, don't go to them, or there's other groups you'd say go to them? Or from your perspective, what kind of wisdom would you give a pastor that was talking about something like that?
Brad?
I would, I was our capital campaign director for our church when we did a building project, and we used Enjoy, which is a John Maxwell group. I know there's lots of them out there. I will be probably honest with you and say I don't know that the value that we got all the value for what we paid. I don't know that it's rocket science. As I looked at it, I'm like, I think I could have figured this out. However, there is value, again, going back to an accountability issue, or for a pastor especially, another voice that's communicating the financial need and the financial issue. So there can be value there. Again, I don't think it's rocket science. And just kind of going back to, that's one of the things we always, whenever we get a chance to, if we get in early enough in a church's process, we do love it when they do a capital campaign. It generates interest in the body. It kind of goes to our priorities in terms of how a church should fund itself. And that would be that first off, you should raise the money. Secondly, if you can't raise it all, then you should borrow from within your own membership. Then you should borrow from the body of Christ. And then, only then, if you can't do that, should you ever borrow outside the body of Christ. And that's kind of, our hierarchy of what I think is the biblical principles of how to do it. So if you can raise the money and we don't have to make a loan, I'm completely excited for the church.
So what do you mean by borrow within the church?
There are some where you can do like bond programs, or we even have one where if let's say you've got an individual with a significant amount of cash in the church, we can work a loan out with them where they can deposit money in the credit union and pledge it against the borrowing of the church. And so, and then when we do it that way, you get the lowest possible rate out there. So you can really save the church a significant amount of dollars. And again, it's going to depend on that individual, what they need for an interest rate on, their type of investment structure. So there are those type of options out there. And then there are bond programs and, different kinds of stuff that are the option.
Excellent. Thank you.
You bet.
Great questions, Craig. Thanks for offering those. That was good. Anyone else have a question?
I just had a comment on Craig's question because we really went around during our project on a capital campaign.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who gave me this insight, but it's really helped me understand it differently. When you do hire an outside consultant, you're basically hiring a temporary staff person. That sort of got my wheels turning for a couple of reasons. If I was hiring a staff person, I would want them to have some embedded understanding of the culture. I was a part of a bad capital campaign where somebody from the Midwest tried to help somebody from the Northwest, and it did not compute. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just a different culture. But it also got me thinking, is there somebody that I would consider bringing on as a temporary staff person who is really good at this? Sort of naturally that God's raised up. So anyway, just thinking through capital campaigns differently, that helped me sort of understand the motive behind it and think creatively about it as well. So
that's really good. Thank you, Dave.
That is good, Dave. Man, I'm so glad we invited you to be a part of this. So with no further questions, we're going to close this out. But once again, I want to thank, again, Northwest Christian Credit Union, who's helped support the Wesley Conference. And I hope you've heard, especially from the heart of Mike and Brad, our CEO, that it's really, we want to serve the church. I mean, that is our heart. It's we want to save our members money. It's not about making a lot of money, and we're able to offer better rates because that's the heart of what Northwest Christian Credit Union's been about since 1965. Started on the campus of NNU in what's now the Fine Arts Building in the basement by some doctors, and now has kind of grown to this. And I'm the marketing guy, so I have to say these kinds of things. So, but also because it's a real service, and we sometimes feel like we're one of the best kept secrets in the Northwest, the Treasure Valley. And so I want you to always feel free, if you have a question about any type of building program or financing or those types of things, that we truly want to be your trusted financial partner and be a resource for that. And we've developed a lot of different relationships and been through a lot of different scenarios, and at least can maybe give some advice, point you in some directions, help you to consider some things. We would love to be part of your team. So with that, I would thank you for being a part of this workshop. We are actually done almost 5 minutes early, and that is probably the gift that we will leave you with, is extra time. So thank you for being a part of this, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Thanks.
I don't know how to close this out.
Yeah, leave the room.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks a lot,
Appreciate
David.
it,
Yeah, I
David.
really appreciate
David.
it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike,
Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you.
being in there. Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.